part two of Wine Talks British Business with Simon Thorpe, MW and WineGB CEO. Can you see any other, I wouldn't necessarily say that's difficult to say, that would be a welcome challenge to increase supply levels, but what about difficulties for the industry? Can you see any coming?
Well, in terms of that sort of supply, do you mean, or
in general? Because it's part of it's the understanding, part of it, like for the consumer, part of it is the supply levels, as we're mentioning. But do you think we're heading somewhere we may not want to be going within all of that?
Well, I suppose. I think you're alluding to the fact that as there's more and more production, then that puts that might put a downward pressure on pricing, I guess. In that an increase in volume could especially if demand doesn't match that increase in production, then you could have more supply, and therefore that a potential downward pressure on pricing. That wouldn't happen if there was a equilibrium on supply and demand. So I suppose that is to an extent manageable. Then of course there's the innovative industry here, looking at Charmat and other production methods for sparkling wine, which are less expensive ways of making sparkling wine. And there's definitely, obviously, a movement that way. But again, you come back to the fact that prices for production of grapes are not cheap in this country, and the economies of scale can go so far. But actually, the cost of a ton of grapes is so dependent upon yield per hectare that that's always going to be a challenge, I think. But the aspiration in this country should be to maintain a real quality focus. I think
absolutely.
We would be absolutely ludicrous to think, right, well, let's see how cheaply we can sell this, rather than let's see how high we can maintain the quality and engage the consumer on the right level, on a quality message rather than a price message. So I think that's we can't control everything, of course, we can't. But given the investment that's required to produce wines, especially sparkling wines, it would be foolish to be putting an unnatural downward pressure on price, I think.
Do you think there's anything that we can learn from some of the other regions? New Zealand, for example, is another New World wine region, and they're doing amazing well with their wines. Is there anything that we could take? Obviously, there are other New World wine regions as well that could benefit us.
Yeah, well, I think the New Zealand one is a really good example, actually, because in many ways, the dynamics of their industry are different from ours. They are extremely dependent on exports, and they've evolved exports, right from the get-go in their overall sort of industry strategy, because they knew that they didn't have the marketplace for it in the domestic market, or they do, but they wouldn't be able to fulfill their potential as an industry just from the domestic market. I had a really, really interesting conversation about bit more than a year ago, just before Christmas in 2020. I've lost track of the years. But with Phil Gregan, who's the head of the New Zealand wine growers, and he has been there for a long, long time. And I was talking to him actually as an interview, which I recorded, and then we used as to think about things as a board of directors of Wines Great Britain. Learning from the experience that they've gone through over the years. And he said some really interesting stuff, actually. One which was to be bold. He said, look, you don't take any prisoners, but not sure quite what we learned from that, but it was an interesting thing to be bold. But what my 30 years in the wine industry, having seen it, kind of coincides with the growth of Marlborough, actually, as a producing region. And I hadn't really cottoned on to what he said, into how it has evolved as an industry. Because basically they came over to the London Wine Fair, back in the day, early 90s, they had a range of different wines. Their winemakers would come, and there's only a handful of them, and they engaged with the trade here and the press, and they asked everybody's opinions on things. So they had some Pinot Gris, they had some Sauvignon, they had some Chardonnays, they had some reds, and they said, "Well, what do you like? What do you think?" And it was, "Wow, that Sauvignon is really good. That's really." So they took that message back to New Zealand, and then evolved New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, on the back of a kind of a demand that was already there, which they then invested in, both in terms of planting more vineyards and getting more kind of investment into the industry, but also from a technological perspective, they researched different flavor profiles and the ways that you create these different flavor profiles, and the whole debate around how many thiols or such like that you want to have in your pyrazines that you want to have in your fruit, in your wine. They did some consumer research, they did a lot of technical research, and then built those into the production. And they effectively, you kind of drove the flavor profile to match the demand. It's not the same in every market, but it is quite similar as a style. And they've evolved it from there. So that's a really good learning. And I always use the comparison or the analogy with New Zealand or Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. It's a bit like, it sounds disparaging, and it's not meant to be. But one of the key positive attributes for any brand is consistent delivery. Yeah. If you go into a McDonald's anywhere in the world, and ask for order a Big Mac, you're going to get the same thing. Yeah. And that's hugely comforting from a consumer perspective. Likewise, if you order a New Zealand, a Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, much as the winemakers will happily say, well, mine's a bit different from theirs and blah, blah, blah. But actually the style that you get from Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc is within a relatively narrow frame. Huh? So that's a real positive attribute for the brand. Something that actually they're constantly saying, well, what next? Well, we've got Sauvignon Blanc sorted. How do we diversify our industry? Because we're a little bit all our eggs in one basket. So that's an interesting area. And of course they've had supply and demand challenges over the years. There was one stage too much wine, one stage not enough, and that happens, and that'll happen to us. I'm absolutely sure it will, because relatively small production within a big marketplace. If you start selling too much wine, you might run out. And frankly, how do you control that? You can only do that collectively. That's pretty impossible to control. But yeah, so that was an interesting one from a learnings perspective. Then there are other areas that we can learn from as well. Less on the production side, more on the commercial side. So there's some fantastic and this is a really, really interesting and exciting area for us as an industry. There are some brilliant wine tourism examples around the world. I used to work a lot in the South African wine industry. So I was there like 4 or 5 times a year, 6 times a year, and then had a gap of 10 years where I hadn't been back. And I went back after that gap in probably 3 years ago, 3-4 years ago. And the development in wine tourism in that decade that I hadn't been there was extraordinary. It really was. And hugely impressive, loads of investment in all sorts of different types of offering for the consumer, or for the interested wine tourist. How we evolve our offer to wine tourists or just wine consumers who want to visit and interested in going out to see vineyards. That's really, really, really interesting. Like, other areas of good practice is, Napa is great, hugely important from an overall economic perspective in California. I think Napa's the second most visited tourism destination in California, extraordinarily. So this adds massively to the economy. Same in Australia. The market, the cellar door operations are brilliant out there, and they've made a a huge difference to the connection between the consumer and the wine industry and the brands themselves. So people have their favorites because they can go and they know the winemaker, they can tell their stories, and they become very loyal to certain brands because of the experiences they've had at the cellar door. So this is an area for real concentration of effort for overall as an industry. The benefits of direct to consumer sales are manyfold. One, you control the environment. Two, it's generally for higher margin sales. Three, that's how you gain this engagement and this long-term loyalty with consumers. So something like half of all sales of English and Welsh wine are direct to consumer through either cellar door or through producers' own websites. And that's a real advantage for the industry that we need to build on. So I think those. So between those two, so the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc thing and the wine tourism around the world, those are two real interesting things. And that research and development side of things, big area of interest for WineGB at the moment is to be able to build a program of projects, and we're not going to run them all ourselves. So, there's quite a lot already going on in different pockets of activity, whether it be in Wales or in different university PhDs. I was on a call with Plumpton where they did where the students there, both the masters and their degree students, were presenting their research projects. Some great stuff, So being able to drive direct research to be able to support the overall industry is a really interesting area as well for us to develop. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that a key focus for WineGB then? Do you have plans in place moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. So we have kind of 5 pillars really of focus for the organisation, and one of those is wine excellence, or product excellence, quality. Which has a number of different facets to it. So research is definitely one of those. Working with Plumpton is that education and career path is definitely one of them, because we have a growing need for quality people in the industry, and we need to be able to deliver quality people a quality career opportunity. So that's a long-term goal, but to be able to optimize the industry, we need to have the best possible people. So that's important. Then, things like the WineGB Awards. So that's rewarding good, best quality product and celebrating that and showcasing that is really important. So that overall, that sort of wine excellence is an area of focus. Tourism, as we've just spoken about, is one, definitely. I'm really keen. I'm going to be a bit preemptive here, but I think we should have an industry cellar door awards program. Best cellar door, best restaurant, best tour, best tour guide, or something. Best tasting experience, and you can do that regionally as well. So you can have regional champions and things. I just think that's absolutely a no-brainer for us to do, but I've probably just given somebody else the idea to do it now. So, but never mind. So tourism is really good. How do we showcase best practice? How do we make sure that whenever anybody visits any winery or any vineyard, that they get an enjoyable experience, which is kind of fits or exceeds their expectations? I think managing that from the bottom upwards is important. Export's a long-term goal. Think of the champagne industry, for example. I think 55% or thereabouts is exported. And we're currently about 4%. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but that's about building. You can't just turn on export markets just like that. So that's a long-term strategic objective to be able to do the groundwork, to be able to supply overseas, and that definitely means targeting core markets rather than a sort of blanket approach, and then establishing or helping producers to establish good supply chain and distribution networks in those core markets, and raising awareness as well in markets, because we might we might think we know that everybody knows and loves our wines, but it's, you know, in some markets, and especially in the more mature markets, the English wine category in the States, you know, very small, very, very small category, and, you know, highly competitive market. So you know, there's work to be done on that front. So export's good, you know, as I say, a long-term strategy. Sustainability is absolutely fundamental, and that's you know, we've focused through the Sustainable Wines of Great Britain program on the environment so far, so vineyard and viticulture, and that's vineyard and winemaking, and that's growing nicely. It's really rewarding to see the first wines coming onto the market really now, and that will grow, that number. And then I think once you get you know, a sizable number of wines with the SWGB logo on them, then that is going to act as a kind of compelling reason for everybody else, as much as looking after the you know, the stewardship of the land that we work. You know, the commercial imperative is very, very strong. Next steps on that for us are to look around social and economic sustainability as well, or viability and long-term resilience. So that's really, really important, but again, very exciting, and we can be proud of what we've done, because there's some really good carbon calculator that we have, which is almost, you know, one could easily say it's you know, one of the best of its type in the world of wine. So that's good. And we're very lucky to have Chris Foss leading that program. He's a guru, which is great. And then the last of the 5 areas is we defined as leadership, and leadership is all around building awareness for the industry. So that's our marketing and PR and events program, tastings, conferences, you know, those sorts of things. But lots of PR and social media. We've got a new website that's coming shortly as well. That's also our work with the government, with DEFRA and DIT in particular, around creating the right context for producers to be able to be successful. In there is you know, lobbying of the Treasury for their as part of the excise duty review. So you know, there's we're really keen to get a proposal around cellar door or small producer duty relief across the board, and it's quite we were quite frustrated at the announcement at the budget last year that our proposal for cellar door relief was rejected effectively. I think they're looking to support small producers, but they're proposing to do a scheme which is only for alcohol products up to 8.5% of alcohol, which doesn't really help us at all. So we're working with them to try to change that. And that being said, there was definitely and we were very, very pleased that the sort of anomaly that had been in place where sparkling wine duty is higher than still wine duty, that makes no sense whatsoever. So in the recommendations from the Treasury excise duty review team is that still and sparkling wine should be equalised, which is great because 2/3 at least of our production is sparkling wine. So that helps. So that's part of the leadership. But also the other thing is that we're forming as WineGB, but I think as an industry overall, we want to be kind of more central to the whole of the wine industry here in the UK. So 99% of wine drunk in this country is imported, and there are big established networks of distributors and on-trade and retailers, and we are of growing importance, but we are still small. But we want to be leaders within the wine industry. So that means things like linking with the WSET. We're doing it. We've done a deal, a mutual support sponsorship with the WSET, where our members get discounts on WSET course and the like, and WSET can get benefits, or their students or their diploma alumni can get discounts with us. But it's more about the sort of collaboration, the partnerships there. and one sort of tangible element to that is, a strong values around diversity and inclusion and accessibility and those sorts of things. And we did a really interesting half-day webinar, mini conference sort of thing on D&I just last month. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, very thought-provoking. But this is introducing those sorts of models and that that concept into our world, but also hopefully then into the overall supply chain. So that's the sort of leadership element. It's here we are. We're English wine and Welsh wine. Bang, come with us. We're great. We're modern. We're vibrant. We're innovative. We're growing. So we're a good horse to back.
Simon, thank you so much for your time. There's been so much content there, and it's great to hear direct from you, being at the helm of WineGB, as we said. And what a great way to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.